Whoever strikes a man so that he dies shall be put to death. But if he did not lie in wait for him, but God let him fall into his hand, then I will appoint for you a place to which he may flee. But if a man willfully attacks another to kill him by cunning, you shall take him from my altar, that he may die. Whoever strikes his father or his mother shall be put to death. Whoever steals a man and sells him, and anyone found in possession of him, shall be put to death. Whoever curses his father or his mother shall be put to death. When men quarrel and one strikes the other with a stone or with his fist, and the man does not die but takes to his bed, then if the man rises again and walks outdoors with his staff, he who struck him shall be clear. Only he shall pay for the loss of his time, and shall have him thoroughly healed. Whenever a man strikes his slave, male or female, with a rod, and the slave dies under his hand, he shall be avenged. But if the slave survives a day or two, he is not to be avenged, for the slave is his money. When men strive together and hit a pregnant woman, so that her children come out, but there is no harm, the one who hit her shall surely be fined, as the woman's husband shall impose on him, and he shall pay as the judges determine. But if there is harm, then you shall pay life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, stripe for stripe. When a man strikes the eye of his slave, male or female, and destroys it, he shall let the slave go free because of his eye. If he knocks out the tooth of his slave, male or female, he shall let the slave go free because of his tooth. When an ox gores a man or a woman to death, the ox shall be stoned, and its flesh shall not be eaten. But the owner of the ox shall not be liable. But if the ox has been accustomed to gore in the past, and its owner has been warned but has not kept it in, and it kills a man or woman, the ox shall be stoned, and its owner shall be put to death. If a ransom is imposed on him, then he shall give for the redemption of his life whatever is imposed on him. If it gores a man's son or daughter, he shall be dealt with according to this same rule. If the ox gores a slave, male or female, the owner shall give to their master 30 shekels of silver, and the ox shall be stoned. May the Lord add his blessing to the reading of his word this morning. You may be seated. There's sort of a strange delight I have in getting into these passages that are very unsavourable for our modern society to get into, and to unearth what God is all about, because God is consistently about what's good. And this text is no different than any other. I want to offer a brief outline of our sermon this morning concerning grace culture. Is that what you felt from this text? Why are you laughing? You didn't sense grace culture from this text? Our outline this morning: forest of the text, trees of the text, and tree of the text. Forest of the text, I want to not look at each individual verse at the beginning and just talk in broad terms about this passage. I want to talk about the forest, not missing the forest for sake of the trees, but then in our second point of this morning's message, I want to talk about the trees. In detail, we'll do a rapid fire read through the text with brief comment along the way, and then finally we'll talk about the tree of the text, pointing to our Savior, Jesus Christ, who died on a tree. So let's begin with the forest of the text. Like I said, I want to take a step back from the verses and just say, okay, what are the overarching themes of this text that we should read and notice as we read the text? Number one, we should understand this passage as promoting life. Promoting life. Now, Just like last week when we considered Hebrew servants or slaves, you could read that and read it with modern culture in mind and think, oh my goodness, the Bible is condoning slavery. But what we actually found last week is that the Bible, what it's promoting is rehabilitation for those who have gotten themselves into lots of trouble. And hopefully at the end of last week's sermon, you found in your heart, oh my goodness, as opposed to thinking the Bible's condoning slavery, I actually think I'm too selfish to even participate in this process. I don't know that I would take someone into my house for 6 years and then send them out liberally and reform them. That's a pretty big commitment, and I'm too selfish to do that. So far from the text last week condoning slavery as we understand it with American brains, what we should have seen last week is that it was promoting rehabilitation in great love, actually. Just like this morning, we read this text, and it's very easy to walk away and think that this text is all about death and capital punishment, which it is, and we'll speak to that, and getting vengeance and this sort of thing. What we find in this text is that Israel received this while they were a child, an infant as a nation. No one had committed these offenses yet as a nation. So God is telling them these things to prevent these things from happening. Do you see that? So these laws are given to say, look, you're about to go into the new Eden. And I want Eden to be a place where you don't have to lock your doors. And you can leave your keys in your car. And you don't have to worry about your kids playing in the street or walking a mile to their friend's house. You're totally fine with that. Because these laws set out at the beginning warn you that if such and such happens, this will be the response. And that is meant to condition you to say, oh my goodness, we will value life. And as a result of valuing life through righteous judgment, we won't dabble with death. That's what this law was for. It was to prevent the loss of life, not to take it. That wasn't its first goal. Yes, it has that as a goal when life is taken. But it's given here at the beginning, while Israel is a child, to say, never mess with death. Just consider this for a moment. We live in a culture that prides itself on being against capital punishment. It's disappearing at a rapid rate from our nation. Now just consider this. Since 1976, the U.S. has executed 1,491 convicts. Since 1976. 1,491 convicts. Now, are you ready for this? In Cook County, in Illinois, in 2021, 1,087 people were murdered last year. Do you see? When you treat the loss of life lightly, the loss of life will become heavy. When you treat casually the loss of life, your numbers will soar. They'll stagger you with murder, with homicide. When you treat homicide lightly, like we do as a nation, and are increasingly doing so, even boasting ourselves in that, you will find that you don't want to go in certain neighborhoods after dark or at all. Because the loss of life is treated casually in our nation, we have an abundance of loss of life. So this law was given so that you didn't have to worry about certain neighborhoods. That's what's important to understand. And we are a good, bad example of not taking this law in any sense seriously. Because we pride ourselves on leniency, which results in abundance of homicide. So it was to promote life. Number two, it was to restrict vengeance. Listen, I hope you have never had this experience, but if you're like me, you have. It's It's saddeningly easy for me to fall into gossip. It's easy to do for me. Hope it's not easy for you, but I find myself dabbling in it too easily sometimes. But what troubles me even more than that, as bad as that is how offended I am when I find out I've been gossiped about. It's like crazy. Like I'm awestruck. Like, what? They? Et tu, Brute? Me? Stabbing me in the back? And if like the Holy Spirit were present, and he is, but didn't you at lunch just kind of say something a little derogatory about so-and-so? Well, I mean, you know. The point is that it's incredibly easy to see how our heads get very screwy in executing justice when you look at gossip. We can easily dabble in gossip, but when we find out we've been gossiped about, we just think the heavens are falling. We see this at the very beginning of the Bible in a man named Lamech. God says to Cain, Cain, don't worry. If someone murders you, they'll be avenged 7 times by me. This is what Lamech says. I have killed a man for wounding me, a young man for striking me. If Cain's revenge is 7-fold, then Lamech's is 77-fold. In other words, what this is meant to point out is that you and I are incredibly corrupt as our own executioners and judges. We take offenses at ourselves and blow them completely out of proportion. That's what Lamech tells us. And we look at Lamech and we say, what a nutcase. But you're the same way, and so am I. So this law was given to restrict vengeance. It was to say, thus far you shall come and no farther. But in this day and in our own lives, we are very, very easily angered. Have you ever pulled into a parking spot and been so upset at the car next to you that because they were over the line a little bit, so you had to like not park the way you wanted to park? And as you're walking out of your car, you then realize the person that pulls into my empty slot is going to be mad at me the way I was mad at them, but it wasn't my fault. I did it because he did it. Right? Do you just think I'm crazy up here? I hope you have these thoughts. The point is you're so quick to judge this guy for how he parked. And all of a sudden, you're parking just the way he parked, and someone's going to judge you. But you say, but I'm innocent. This is who we are. When we are in sin, our heads are so messed up. We are not good judges of ourselves or other people when we're sinned against. We get it all out of proportion. And so this law was to restrict vengeance and say, you shall not come further than this. The judgment shall fit the crime. Don't go overboard. Number 3. Forrest of the text says that these judgments were to reflect God. When I went to Ethiopia to teach the young pastors over there, their favorite subject was the retributive justice of God. There would be times in class where I would be able to tell them what I learned in studying through Genesis and through the Torah, and we'd get to the retributive justice of God, and they would bust out laughing because it was so brilliant. Even though it's tragic, there's a certain beauty to God's thoughts not being our thoughts and God's ways not being our ways. But when we chew on God's ways, we say, that's brilliant. He's incredible. Let me just offer you a few of God's judgments which perfectly fit the crime from a divine perspective, and it should be our perspective as well. So Adam and Eve prefer to live in their own image rather than God's image. True? They do. So God says, now I will hand you over to what your image looks like. They have 2 boys, and one kills the other. Adam and Eve, you have chosen death. You've chosen to eat from the other tree than life. And now you will experience death. It's the retributive justice of God. Lot, through a series of poor decisions, chose a glamorous city. He chose to live in a place where you had to fight to keep your door shut from men raping other men, and young boys too. They were part of that whole thing too. I don't say this to cause you to blush. It's just in the Bible. And Lot, in his craziness, offers his 2 daughters to this crazy group of men. And ironically, Lot will end up living not in a glamorous city, but in a cave where his daughters will sleep with him. It's too much to handle, but that's how God's justice unfolds. We go on, and we encounter Jacob, who fools his father Isaac, and then is introduced to the master fooler Laban for 20 years. We're introduced to Judah, who brokers a sale of Joseph, and then in turn brokers himself to give Benjamin back to his father. It's a beautiful turn of events. We're introduced to Saul, King Saul, who chases David with the sword to kill him and ends his life by falling on his own sword and is eventually lingering in death and is dispatched by an Amalekite who God told him annihilate all the Amalekites. And the text tells you, and by the way, it was an Amalekite who was walking by and killed Saul. We're introduced to Esther and Haman. Haman, who builds the gallows for Mordecai to be hung, and who ends up but Haman being hung on his own gallows. We're introduced to Pharaoh, who was trying to kill Israel, God's firstborn son, and in the end has his firstborn son slayed. We're introduced to his military, who would have carried out the orders of casting all the Israelite boys into the Nile. And in the end, it's the military who are buried in the waters. All of these things demonstrate that God's justice is a one-for-one. You cut the tree down, and God has it fall where you cut it. That's the way God works. Hell itself is a perfect justice of God. Humanity has requested to live a completely godless life, and so God gives them a godless eternity. You've chosen it. This is the concept of hell. C.S. Lewis says, in the end, there will only be 2 thy wills. Those who say to God, thy will be done, or those to whom God says, thy will be done. And they're introduced to a godless eternity. What we find in God is an exacting judgment that is an inappropriate proportion to the crime. And so when God gives what's called the lex talionis, the eye for the eye, the tooth for a tooth, what he's doing is he's leveling a judgment that is appropriate to the crime. It's not over, it's not under. All throughout the law, it says you shall not have pity on the wealthy, which you could see why, and you're not to have pity on the poor, which you should see why. You can find within yourself the feeling of partiality to the rich or partiality to the poor. You can see it, and that's why God has to warn against it, because that's not like him. He is perfectly impartial in executing his judgment. And number 4, this cluster of laws invites us to trust him. Very likely in this context, these laws were seen as too light. When you compare the Hebrew law with the surrounding ancient Near East laws of the day, the Code of Hammurabi and such, you find that this law is much more high scrutiny. It's much more ethical than their laws. There was capital punishment for the Hebrews if they killed a slave. There was nothing like that in that day. You could treat your slave however you want. The fact that if you knocked a slave's tooth out, they were freed was unheard of. So this law, as compared with the other cultures of the day, was way more extreme than theirs. They would have seen this as light in the sense of generosity. That's way too generous. It's way too generous. Heavy in that way because it's too light. But in our culture, we read this and we think it's too heavy. We've become less vengeful in a sense and more weak in a sense in executing justice. But what this law does is it tells us to trust him. Whether you think he's too heavy or too light, trust him. Extract the principles from this text and see if you don't end up with a better society. That's the test we have before us this morning. It is to trust him and to trust the trajectory of this text as it culminates in the person of Jesus Christ, which we'll get to at the end. So that's the forest of the text. Now let's consider the trees of the text. What we're going to do is in rapid fire read through the text, and I'll make brief comment as we go. So it'll be on the screen, but you can look in your text as well. The verse number's up there. So the trees of the text, let's consider them in turn. First, whoever strikes a man so that he dies shall be put to death. So this is referring to capital punishment, speaking of premeditated murder. Other texts in the Torah make clear that capital punishment could not be carried out unless two witnesses saw it. So this ensures that faulty capital punishments can't happen, which is, of course, why some people are opposed to capital punishment, because it has been executed in our nation and proven to be this person was innocent. Of course, that can happen, and of course, we might oppose certain capital punishments. It will be the case, but the law seeks to prevent that with witnesses. Verse 13, but if he did not lie in wait for him, but God let him fall into his hand, then I will appoint for you a place to which he may flee. So this is not premeditated murder. This in fact, will get espoused later in the text. What I want to draw attention to now is the place to which you are to flee. See, this is the idea. When human blood was spilled, we see it back with Abel. What does God say Abel's blood's doing? It's crying out from the ground. We even get to the book of Hebrews and it says it's still crying out. So there is a sense in which human blood cries out to God until it's reconciled, until it's fully dealt with. And so the way this worked is even if it wasn't premeditated murder, even if your axe head flew off in the forest and your friend's helping you cut down the tree and the axe head hits him in the head and kills him, you are guilty of spilling blood, even though you didn't mean to. Now, should you have taken better care of your axe? You should have, and that's what this law was meant to prevent. So that when you're working with your friend, you take care that your chainsaw is working right and that you know how to cut down trees and all the like, because you value human life. But if you spill blood, his blood or her blood is crying out from the ground. Therefore, you need to go to a city of refuge. This is also unheard of in the ancient Near East. God would dedicate 6 cities to this, and you had to stay in that city. So even though you didn't mean to spill blood, through your derelictness, you spilt blood. Now that blood is crying out, and it won't be avenged until you pay for that. So you have to live in a city of refuge. If you leave the city, the avenger could kill you if you leave the city. Or you could leave the city when the high priest died. And the high priest would absorb your guilt, as it were, and you would be free to go. But this is the idea. Blood demands an accounting. Why? Because human blood is made in the image of God, and therefore it is treated with great sanctity. Verse 14, but if a man willingly attacks another to kill him by cunning, you shall take him from my altar that he may die. So what would happen here is if someone killed someone, whether they were innocent or guilty, what we find is that several people go to the altar of God. We see this with Adonijah in 2 Kings and with Joab as well. They go to the altar of God. Now, why did they go to the altar of God? You'll see them grab a hold of the altar when they're guilty for something. The reason they likely did that is because that's where the wrath of God stopped for sin, at the altar, correct? But also because they would think in their heads, no one wants to desecrate the altar and murdering me here, so it's sort of like a sanctuary city for me. But God says if he's guilty, like Joab and Adonijah were, you're to take them from the altar and capital punish them. But this is the idea with God's altar in the text. Verse 15, whoever strikes his father or mother shall be put to death. Now, people like to take God's law and make fun of it and say, if a baby, or a 2-year-old hits their dad, you're to kill them. That's what God's law says. The word for strike here is the word that's used for Cain striking Abel. It can be translated beat down. Now, why would a child be capitally punished for doing something that otherwise wouldn't be capital punished between two men? The reason is because parents reflect the image of God in two ways. Number one, they reflect the image of God as a human in general, but the second way in which they reflect an image of God is that they provided life for this child, nourishment, care. This is the concept, that they're in a sense a double image of God. Fascinatingly, the Code of Hammurabi doesn't even mention the mother, which demonstrates that from the beginning, the scriptures understood men and women to be of equal value before the Lord. This is the idea that when you wrong parents, it's the essential equivalent of who won't you wrong. It's kind of like with adultery. When a man cheats on his wife, who won't he betray? It's that sort of concept. When you act against those who are absolutely to be most treasured, and you do that to them, everyone else is below them, then you are a terror that needs to be eradicated. That's the concept. Verse 16. Whoever steals a man and sells him, and anyone found in possession of him, shall be put to death. We discussed this verse last week, where the U.S. slavery that took place would have ended in capital punishment for both the stealer of a person and the buyer of a person. This is the concept. Now, of course, you can get into the inner details of, well, if I don't take this person, someone else is going to take this person, and they're here. You get into those things. This is speaking of, I want this person as a slave, and that type of concept. Verse 17, whoever curses his father or his mother shall be put to death. And what you'll find is that these laws work from the greater to the lesser in a sense. So now we're talking about not hitting mom or dad, we're talking about cursing them. And so what does this mean? Because people like to make light of this verse as well, or make it seem heavy or whatever they do. The word for curse in this passage means to treat lightly. To treat lightly. And you might think, man, that makes it even worse. My kids treat me lightly all the time. Well, Deuteronomy 21 goes into more detail on what this means. And I want to read that to you. Just listen, it won't be on the screen. If a man has a stubborn and rebellious son, who will not obey the voice of his father or the voice of his mother, and though they discipline him, will not listen to them, then his father and his mother shall take hold of him and bring him out to the elders of his city at the gate of the place where he lives. And they shall say to the elders of his city, this is our stubborn and rebellious. Our son is stubborn and rebellious. He will not obey our voice. He is a glutton and a drunkard. Then all the men of the city shall stone him to death with stones. So you shall purge the evil from your midst, and all Israel shall hear and fear. Now, what is notable from this is that this person is clearly an adult. It's not a child. It's an adult. Old enough to eat on his own and eat and eat and eat and eat. He's old enough to get drunk on his own. He's brought to the judges. This isn't the parents doing it on their own. He's brought to the judges of the city, who are also supposed to be able to notice this about this man. In other words, he has a long reputation of this. They're to agree with it and see it if it's actually happening. Now, our world looks at this and they say, this is just craziness. This is the Old Testament nuts culture. While we have a world that is heading at warp speed toward this very thing. How do I say that? Well, 100 years ago, when a young man was 14 years old, he was able to run a farm. on his own. In our day, you don't get off your parents' insurance until the average marital age is like, and I'm not condemning every sort of thing here, but what I'm saying is our children are growing up at a much later age. Parents accommodate it, and the government supports it. This is what's happening in our culture. We are very countercultural as a church, where we have our high schoolers choose an adult Sunday class to attend. The reason we do that is we want them to mingle with other adults. We want an intergenerational upbringing so that they're not supported within the church from every age group and every interest group. We want them to be treated as adults. So as much as our world judges this ethic, what we find is that because we judge it so harshly, our kids will remain kids for much, much longer in our culture. This is the idea. Verse 18, when men quarrel and one strikes the other with a stone or his fist, and the man does not die but takes to his bed, then if that man rises again and walks outdoors with his staff, he who struck him shall be clear, only he shall pay for the loss of his time. He shall have him thoroughly healed. This law too went way beyond the ancient Near East, which has them do one or the other, but not both. In the Israelite, if a fight broke out and you hurt somebody to the point where they couldn't go to work, you were to nurse them back to health, and you were to pay for their lost wages. You see this in the Good Samaritan, who didn't do anything to this poor stranger wounded on the side of the road, but took upon himself to care for him, to nurse him, to put oil on his wounds, to bring him to a place where he could be cared for. This is the concept in the Good Samaritan. Verse 20, when a man strikes his slave, and 21, male or female, with a rod, and the slave dies under his hand, he shall be avenged. So this is unprecedented. The man would be capitally punished for killing his slave. But if the slave survives a day or two, he is not to be avenged, for the slave is his property or possession, his money. Now, again, we're dealing with corporal punishment, which in our world is completely insane and unaccepted, but I'm not here to please our world. It's not why I'm standing here. I'm standing here to communicate to you God's word and say that this is in some way, shape, or form the best for us. So let me espouse this a little bit. Number one, it wasn't very long ago where my father was in the military and suffered corporal punishment. Within the last, I don't know, how old is my father? So we have this, a very short time, and again, you need to think of a servant in a military context. Now, again, it's not a perfect one-for-one, but some people do get in the military as a dead-end approach. Not everybody. A lot of people get in to fight for their country. It's amazingly awesome and protect the nation, but others can get in because they have no other outlet. This is very much what it was like in servanthood, and some in this context got into the situation they're in because they were unruly. I said last week that you likely know someone that could use a 6-year apprenticeship with someone in the church to teach them how to work. Now, as much as you might be upset at corporal punishment, God tolerated it. He allowed it. And even in the Proverbs, it's recommended. Listen to Douglas Stewart. Corporal punishment remains widely in use in the modern world, being built into the familial and even formal legal structures of many nations. It was virtually universally practiced in the ancient world and predominated in the modern Western world until the latter part of the 20th century. Although many Westerners would today regard slapping, spanking, caning to be forms of abuse, it should be noted that their opinions are not historically grounded. Friends, listen. We can thumb our noses at this law all we want, but all we have to do is look at the skyrocketing prison population in our nation and say, would those numbers be anything different if some of this were more a part of our culture? We have to ask ourselves that question. I'm not here to win popular votes as your politician. This is the deal. Servanthood was meant to be reformative. And God understood that part of reformation in an unruly person may involve corporal punishment. And he doesn't flinch at that. Verses 22 and 23, 24, and 25. When men strive together and hit a pregnant woman so that her children come out, but there is no harm, the one who hit her shall be fined, as the woman's husband shall impose on him, and he shall pay as the judges determine. But if there is harm, then you shall pay life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, stripe for stripe. Now, let me first comment on the pregnant woman and the child. It's very likely that the child is part of this. The Hebrew's a bit foggy to unpack, but it's likely that both the woman's life and the child's life, if one of them were to be harmed, they were to be avenged, which, of course, goes against abortion. Now, what probably would happen here is a woman's husband was fighting with another man over something, and she sought to intervene, and something happened to her in the process. But when it says, this is where we get this lex talionis, crime for crime, or a just punishment. What it's seeking to do here, it's virtually, let me put it this way, unheard of in the ancient Near East with Israelite, that somebody lost an eye and then they took an eye out from someone else. Minus, there's one passage where a king cut off all the thumbs and toes of other kings and had them under their table. You remember that? And he's avenged in the same way. That's one place where something like this happens. But what you need to notice is the word for you shall pay life for life. That's a monetary term, which means that as this case was brought to the judges, very much like in our day, there would be a payment that what you did to this person would cost them this much, as it were. This is a fitting price tag for what you stole from this person or stole from their body. And so you would pay it monetarily out. This wasn't, hey, you knocked my eye off, so I'm going to gouge yours. It wasn't like that. It was a monetary word, and you see this in other places in the text, as we'll see as we finish up here. Verse 26, when a man strikes the eye of his slave, male or female, and destroys it, he shall let the slave go free because of his eye. If he knocks out a tooth of his slave, male or female, he shall let the slave go free because of his tooth. We discussed this, where if there was the slightest over mistreatment of a slave, they were to be released. Unheard of in the ancient Near East. Verse 28, when an ox gores a man or a woman to death, the ox shall be stoned, and its flesh shall not be eaten, but the owner of the ox shall not be liable. Now, what I want to point out here is that this is very odd in the ancient Near East for an animal to be stoned. That happened to human in capital punishment, not to animals. For the animal not to be eaten was very unheard of. So why does God do this? Well, what we find in the text is that ever since the time of the serpent, which is an animal, God introduced these categories within the animal kingdom of clean and unclean. Unclean animals carry commonalities with the serpent. How do they do that? Well, the serpent was associated with dirt, which is associated with death. The man's made of dust. He'll go back to the earth. So dust seems to have to do with death. The serpent is near the dust, will go on the dust. And so animals that eat things that are rotting or eat manure or garbage or that crawl on their bellies or have fleshy pads on their feet that touch the ground, they are considered unclean. So anything that associates with the dirt in an interesting way is considered unclean. If they have scales or don't have scales that block them from the watery environment, they're considered unclean. If they have to do with death in a certain way, they're considered unclean. So this ox, having killed someone, would be considered unclean. It's important to think in those categories to understand the Torah. Verses 29 and 30. But if the ox is accustomed to gore in the past, and its owner has been warned and not kept it in, and it kills a man or a woman, the ox shall be stoned, and its owner shall also be put to death. If a ransom is imposed on him, then he shall give for the redemption on his life whatever is imposed on him. I'm not trying to pick on dog owners here, so don't take this personally. We own a dog. Now, we recently, like I think last summer, had a situation where a pit bull got in our house. He's running around our yard. Kids open the door, not understanding pit bulls, and he runs in our house. We had 2 babies crawling on the ground. We just gotten our puppy, and he lunged at the pit bull. The pit bull bit his ear, and then I'm trying to get the pit bull out of our house. He doesn't have a collar. I'm leaning down to pick him up, which I learned later is not smart. And we finally get the pit bull out of the house. Now, I went to the person's house that owned the pit bull, and I said, hey, I just want to give you the context. We had 2 infants on the ground when the pit bull got in our house. The pit bull didn't have a collar, so it was really hard to get a hold of him to get him out of the house. I just want to present you with the context. This was very scary for our family, And they took it well, but it's this sort of thing that is at play here, that we need to understand what's in context here. This is what this law is meant to do. Now, finally, we come to the end of the text. If it gores a man's son or daughter, he shall be dealt with according to this same rule. If the ox gores a slave, male or female, the owner shall give to their master 30 shekels of silver, and the ox shall be stoned. Now, this verse might trouble us that the slave being killed by an ox is not capitally punished. Now, what's important again to understand here is a military context. This is what it was like. If a lieutenant in the military sends his soldiers into battle and it turns out he made a foolish decision, he would likely not be sued or punished in the same way that an owner-operator at Tyson would for not handling his machines right and someone died. Tyson would probably get sued big time, whereas a lieutenant probably wouldn't, even though he may have made a foolish error in the choice. So this is kind of the context that helps us understand what's at play here. Now, that was a lot. I want to summarize it with a verse from Proverbs before we get to the tree of the text. Proverbs 8:35 and 36 says this: Whoever finds me finds life and obtains favor from the Lord. But he who fails to find me injures himself. All who hate me love death. So friends, as you look at this passage, what you need to see, what is meant to be seen, is the provision of life, not an opportunity for death. You're meant to see what these laws would create is a culture of life, of responsible people who stay as far away from death as possible, who value life so highly that if their ox misbehaves, they put it down. They check their axe head before they cut down a tree with a friend. They take every precautionative measure to protect life. They obey their fathers and mothers and respect them. Jesus actually will take this in the New Testament regarding fathers and mothers and say, look, you're actually worthy of being capitally punished because you don't take care of your old parents. This is a society that we scorn here, and yet we live in the society where we do, where prisons are chock full and old folks' homes don't have room for people. This is what we're inheriting because of what we pursue. We are a culture that loves death as much as we say we don't. This is what happens. And so, let's close by looking at Christ, the tree of the text. Look at how the author of Hebrews writes in Hebrews chapter 6, verse 18 through 20. we who have fled for refuge, think of what that might sound like, might have strong encouragement to hold fast to the hope set before us. We have this as a sure and steadfast anchor of the soul, a hope that enters into the inner place behind the curtain where Jesus is gone as a forerunner on our behalf. Where do we see in the Old Testament someone fleeing for refuge? Except someone who has committed a murderous crime fleeing to a city of refuge. The author of Hebrews is playing off this, saying that Christ is our city of refuge. He is our place where we can go, which amazingly is behind the curtain, where judgment of God stops. This is where we are able to go to get away from our misdeeds, our crimes, in Christ. Jesus says, listen, I don't care if you haven't murdered someone physically. When have you been angry at the last person? You are guilty of murder in your heart. So every one of us in this room are murderers that need to flee to the city of refuge, which the New Testament calls Jesus Christ. Look at Psalm 22. This is the psalm from which Jesus quoted while he was on the cross. And he says this. Think of our context this morning. Many bulls encompass me. Strong bulls of Bashan surround me. They open wide their mouths at me like a ravening and roaring lion. Save me from the mouth of the lion. You have rescued me from the horns of the wild oxen. I will tell of your name to my brothers. In the midst of the congregation, I praise you. Just consider that Jesus quotes from this psalm while on the cross. Which talks about his servant being gored by wild oxen. And then just ask yourself, it doesn't take a big leap. Ask yourself, how much was the price that Judas received for betraying Jesus? 30 pieces of silver, which were to be paid for a servant's life if he or she got gored by a wild ox. So Jesus received for his death, Judas received for Jesus' death the price of a servant who got gored by an ox. And Jesus quotes from Psalm 22, which talks about being gored by a wild ox, which is to say that Jesus is a servant, paid the price for a servant for us. It's absolutely incredible. Which takes us to how Jesus talks about this law, which he does on the Sermon on the Mount. And this is what Jesus says about this law, this exact text in Matthew 5, 38 to 42. You have heard it said, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist the one who is evil. But if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if anyone would sue you and take your tunic, let him have your cloak as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2 miles. Give to the one who begs from you, and do not refuse the one who would borrow from you. Now, I want to close by asking 3 questions based on what Jesus practices with his life and says in this text. Number 1, will you trust personally God's payment for your crime? Will you trust Jesus as your city of refuge rather than your own works? Will you do that? Are you resting in Christ's city of refuge versus trying to clean yourself up before God and make yourself free on your own? Will you flee to his city personally? You see, this law is all about letting God set the judgment for a crime. And he has set as the judgment for your crime Jesus dying on the cross. Is that okay with you? Are you willing to accept that judgment? Or are you concocting in your religious experience another judgment? That I do this and I do that and I do this, and that's what I'm going to approach God on when I die? Or are you headed toward God on the merits of Jesus Christ and his payment for your sin? That's question number one. Have you trusted God's judgment personally in the person of Jesus? Question number two. Will you trust God's method interrelationally? You see, the goal of this passage in Exodus 21 is to let God reform Israel, not Israel reform Israel. So you're to do it God's way. And what Jesus says in Matthew 5 is, if doing it God's way is not going overboard, I got hit, I hit, so to speak. I got mistreated this way, I will execute justice this way. Jesus is saying, if that's right, why don't you go all the way and leave all the judgment to God? Leave it all to him. You don't avenge yourself even righteously. Put it all in God's court and see what he does. In other words, forgive. Forgive. As God in Christ has forgiven you. And let God reform this person, not by your justice, but by your forgiveness. Put it all in God's court. That's what Jesus is after. The problem is that the Israelites of Jesus' day were taking matters all into their own hands all too quickly. They were saying, okay, if he did this, then I'm going to do this. And if some law is good, then more law is better. And I'm going to keep doing more and more and more. And I'm going to focus on what is the right justice and how can we execute it perfectly. And Jesus is saying, no, listen, you're trying to reform a man's heart through law. The law was always pointing to, the fulfillment of the law is to reform man from the inside, not from external parameters. When you forgive, you tangle with someone's heart, not just with their body. So forgive, and this person will be reformed forever. They'll reform other people when they've been forgiven. You see, people that are law-bent are taking it into their own hands in a crooked way. He's saying, leave it all with me. And so, when someone wrongs you, is that what you're pursuing? Are you turning them over to God, or are you letting them have what they deserve in the way that you think they deserve it? And then finally, number 3, will you trust God's methods corporately, judicially, I could say? You see, here's the problem. People can take what Jesus said in Matthew 5, and they can try to apply it in a corporate sense. They can say, therefore, the government shouldn't execute capital punishment. I'm going to take what Jesus says and I'm going to apply it to the third party, the government or the church, whatever the authority in picture might be. But what Jesus is speaking about is a personal forgiveness. That if someone murders a family member of mine, I am called to personally forgive them. The state, what does Romans 13 say? Does not bear the sword for nothing. In other words, the state is meant to do what the state is meant to do. But personally speaking, I'm meant to do what I'm meant to do, which is to forgive. See, here's the idea. We take passages like this and we negate what other passages of scriptures say. For instance, we are to forgive our brother. But the Bible also talks about church discipline, does it not? And so what do you do with that? How do you handle that? Well, you're to forgive someone that wrongs you, but Paul also says in Titus 3:10, you're to warn someone who stirs up division 2 times and after that have nothing to do with them. So how do we balance that? We have to allow this passage to work cohesively with the other passages. So let me give you a very down-to-earth example about Dan and Jenny Freeman. So as far as I can recount, Becky and I did premarital counseling for Zach and Hannah, for Nathan and Andrea, for Joel and Jessica, and now we just had our first meeting with Eric and Lauren. Okay? So 4 times now, and we've basically kept the same sort of counseling every time. And we tweaked it a little bit here and there, but our first session is we want to hear about your parents' interrelational dynamic. So, how did they handle money? How did they handle discipline? Who made the decisions in the house? How did they handle conflict? Okay? And we worked through those questions because we are all influenced by how our parents handle all those things, And then you come together with someone who's probably an opposite, and they came from a family that handle all these things differently. So one of the questions that we've asked all the time is, how do your parents handle conflict? Do they fight in front of you? Do they fight behind closed doors? Do they ever fight? And we're not trying to get dirty things on you guys. We're just trying to figure things out. We know most of the answers anyway, but it's important for the kids to answer the question. So all 4 of them, as far as this brain can remember, when it came to the conflict question, said, oh, they fight in front of us. And all 4 of them quickly followed up with, but they always resolve it. And it's really clear that it's resolved. And they're back to doing things that we wish they wouldn't do in front of us. The answer has been the same all the time. And I say that to say that are we a people that have grace culture? That's where this is all going. It's going towards a grace culture to enable life. And what's part of life in an interpersonal dynamic is forgiveness, is not taking things to the nth degree and forgiving others as Christ has forgiven us. That's where this passage is heading. That's why Jesus says, I didn't come to abolish the law, I came to fulfill it, which means that this law was headed to where Jesus took it. And so, friends, are you, by the grace of God, establishing a grace culture in your niche of life? Or are you establishing a hyper-justice culture? That's the question. It doesn't negate what the state needs to do. It doesn't negate what the church needs to do in saying this is black and this is white and this is how we have to move forward. It doesn't negate the other passages in Scripture. But on a personal level, we should have the grace that was afforded of us in Christ afforded to other people. Can you imagine someone living in a city of refuge not forgiving someone else? Can you imagine that? That'd be crazy, right? The blood of the ground is crying out for their life, and they're living on grace, and then they're taking out judgment on someone else in an interpersonal relationship. It'd be unheard of. And that's who we are. So let us live in light of what Jesus has done. Amen? Ask the musicians to come. We look at the law, and we see that God gave it to eliminate a death culture. And Jesus comes on the scene, and he says, this law was always meant to eliminate that, the death culture inside of us. And if laws head that way, then what does forgiveness do? Forgiveness takes it deep, soul level, that we are for life. And you've heard this story. It's one of mine and Pastor Alex's favorite. But it's worth retelling that in the story of Les Miserables, you have Jean Valjean, who is a criminal who spent years in the quarry working, and is released, but he has papers that he has to show everybody. And when he shows them his convict papers, nobody gives him shelter. Nobody wants him to work for them. He's just left on the streets, as it were. And he's on the streets, and he finds a monastery or church, and he goes, and the priest is there, and he asks if he can sleep there instead of on the bench. And the priest lets him in. And in the middle of the night, Valjean gets up and steals all his silverware of the church and splits. Well, he's caught, and he's brought back to the priest, and the guard says to the priest, "You're not going to believe what he said about the silverware. He said that you gave it to him." And the priest looks at Valjean, and he said, "Well, of course I gave it to him. But you forgot the candlesticks. Why did you forget the candlesticks?" And the guard is just mortified, can't believe this. The nun that's there, he looks at the nun and says, "Go, fetch the candlesticks." And she's like, "Never!" But she does as much as she's upset because she's justice. She wants Lex Talionis, which wasn't meant just for that. It was meant to reform men like Valjean. And so the priest takes it to the Christ level place. And he rips down his hood and says to him, "With these candlesticks, I've purchased your soul to God." And he tells him to go live a grace culture life. And Valjean does. And this is the degree to which we are to go with our brothers and sisters, with our family members. This is who we are to be. And that doesn't just reform people on the outside. It makes them different on the inside. And that's what Christ was ultimately after. And that's that to which this law pointed. Go be those people by the grace of God. You're dismissed.